It's Maria Malec again, Taking Healthy Back, and I have another interview with actually one of my favorite people in the whole world, Jeff CANTY. He's a coach, he's a rehab
specialist. I work in golf and tennis fitness.
Okay, and many years ago, Jeff and I used to work out, and I was probably in the best shape of my life when I worked out with him, and he's really knowledgeable and an amazing resource for everything to do with the body. So welcome, and thank you.
Thank you
for joining me. My first question, Jeff, is how does health relate to your success?
Well, obviously I work in the health and wellness industry, so it's directly related to my success financially, but more so mentally. For me, it's the biggest mover of what I do on a daily basis. Every day I do some form of movement or exercise. I try to promote that to my clients, whether that be having them play golf or do some basic exercises every day or hit tennis balls next to us. Being active is what makes us feel good, keeps our endorphins moving, and just keeps us young as long as possible. And longevity is pretty much the key for most of us. Can we continue to play sports or be active for ourselves, our kids, and our grandkids as long as possible?
I love that. So you're actually building a legacy of health for your children.
That's the hope, yeah. And so far, my kids are young, but it seems to be working so far. So we'll see if that continues.
Great. So Jeff, what are your 3 to 5 non-negotiables for sustained wellness?
I guess number 1 would be hydration, making sure you take in enough fluids, so that you can stay moving, stay healthy, and keep your tissue healthy. Something I see on a daily basis out here is we live in Florida, so people that are dehydrated, the tissue it struggles to move, they struggle to move, and it just creates issues for them all around. Number 2 would be a daily movement protocol for wellness. I think too many people get stuck being stationary and just kind of comfortable not doing enough. I was just saying before the interview, my average client is 65 years old now, which is a huge contrast from what I used to work with. And these people tell me that on a daily basis, they might take 2,000 steps a day. We don't need to do 20,000 like some people preach, but at least hitting a 2-mile walk or 2 miles of movement, so that's about 4,000 steps in a day, would help us in the long run. Number 3, I guess, would be, just sleep. Just focus on how well you sleep, because it's going to promote better wellness and recovery. I know it gets talked about a lot in recovery, but it's probably the biggest factor in how well our brain functions and how well our body moves and functions the next day and going forward. So those are probably the main 3 that I focus on: is hydration, movement, and sleep.
How do you feel about supplementation?
I don't promote a lot of it to my clients. I can see a need for it with some people. If I preach anything, it's always very basic. In older men, I talk about like zinc and magnesium. I don't do a lot of sleep aids. I don't do a lot of diet aids. Some people take caffeine. I'd rather see a lot of people take like a choline supplement over a caffeine supplement. But I don't push a lot of that on people. I'd rather them take it in through natural sources if they can get it. I think most people, if they can eat enough food and actually take in enough calories, can sustain themselves well, as long as they're avoiding, soda and out here alcohol.
Right.
Yeah.
How do your kids eat?
All over the place. That's a battle. My kids are under 5. So my youngest daughter does very well, has a milk allergy, so she doesn't get any dairy in, but she eats a lot. Great with protein sources, great with vegetables. My son, it's all over the place. We live on buttered noodles probably too much, but at the same time, it helps with his calorie intake, and he takes in quite a bit of protein. So, we're getting the best we can.
And he's quite a little athlete.
He's doing well. Yeah, he's 5, so he's got a long way to go, but he's definitely involved in it, that's for sure.
That's awesome. And my last question is, what are the kind of injuries that you see the most with your clients, especially in older clientele, and how do you go about the recovery process?
Well, I work primarily in golf and tennis, so obviously lower back and neck issues are the 2 primary and most dominant things that I see I do see quite a bit of shoulder issues also. I think some of that's correlated with the neck on most of these people. Same with the forearm, it's kind of correlated from the neck and lack of mobility. So the biggest thing I preach to most of these people is, one, we need to get moving again. Outside of the sports that they do, we need some daily movement. I spoke on walking earlier. The number one thing we can do as we age is continue to walk and continue to bend. Like, let's just do some squats on air. We don't need weight. Let's just move the body through range of motion, and let's continue to walk. If everybody did that daily, we wouldn't have nearly as many musculoskeletal issues as we do now. So I preach those. And then, as far as the rehab goes, that can get kind of specific depending on the injury. Low back, it's usually a lack of internal hip mobility and how well the hip rotates. So we spend a lot of time trying to focus on getting the hip to rotate and turn, and the femur to move a little bit better in the hip socket. Neck, that can kind of be all over the place. Life pulls us in different directions, and we'll recommend different pillows for people if necessary, and we'll work on some static mobility and trying to build a little more stability through the neck. That way they can have a little more comfort in there.
What about the hips? Do you see a lot of hip issues, tight hips?
Yeah, it's correlated with the low back. I deal with quite a bit of hip replacements, and people coming out of hip replacement, which has great efficacy now. I see people within 6 to 8 weeks back to playing sport, following a hip replacement. The hope is they wouldn't need that, but I usually see them well after that phase has happened. So we do see a lot of hip stuff, and again, it just comes down to move it. Like, we got to keep greasing the wheel. So just try to keep moving as long as possible, and we can kind of avoid or maybe push that stuff away as long as possible.
Well, I'm starting to believe that exercise is more for longevity, not just looking good aesthetically, but really to do life. Opening doors, bending, picking up things, cleaning, and things like that. So what I'm hearing from you is that movement is really important. It's not necessarily exercising per se, doing weight training, but just staying moving so that we can live life easier. Yeah,
that's somewhat of like a misnomer in like the fitness world, that you need to train hard and your fitness is where everything matters and that's what's going to make you look good. And yeah, it helps, it's a benefit, but so does mopping and sweeping your floor, so does gardening. People that live the longest, the two main things they tend to do are go for daily walks and garden, because it lets us bend, flex, pick things up. So it takes us through all the movement patterns that are necessary, and we're in touch with the earth a little bit more, which gives us time to be in touch with ourselves. And I think walking, the biggest component of that is you can internalize things a little bit. It allows you to think. It's a huge component of my life. I go on a 3 to 5 mile walk every day with my family. That's how we start every morning. It's pretty much non-negotiable.
I love that.
So, and it allows us time to talk, allows us time to be together. I'm fairly busy. My wife is extremely busy. Both of my kids are very active. So that's a time that we can kind of come back and just be together. And even if we're just joking around and having a fun and casual time, it still allows us to be together. It's communal. And then for myself, running and walking is huge, because that's my flow meditation. That's how I internalize things, and it always has been that way since I've been about 16 years old. So we're looking at 17, 18 years of that now. And without that component, I would struggle. That's for sure.
So do you do consultation, or do you just work with people in person?
Most of my work is in person. I'm not opposed to FaceTime or old school Skype consultations if necessary. Especially I do work with golfers from out of state. Like we go to Michigan in the summertime, so we'll work with people from other locations if necessary. Or if they're traveling, we will work with people remotely. But most of our work is here in person in Tampa.
Okay, so if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what's the name of your business and how can they get in touch with you?
My business is On Par Performance. You can find it online at onparperformance.com. You can find me on Instagram at coach_CANTY. And those are really just the two avenues that I use for the most part.
All right, great. And if anyone needs what he's got, he's phenomenal. He's a great resource. And to this day, I'll still message him and ask him about different injuries I might have and how to get over them. So great resource here, and thank you for interviewing with me.
Thank you. It's good to see you again.
We want to take healthy back,
Yep.
and Jeff's a great part of that. Thank you.